Good afternoon. The first item of business this afternoon is portfolio questions, and in order to get as many people in as possible, as usual, I'd prefer short and succinct questions and answers to match. Please, the portfolio is finance, employment and sustainable growth. Question number 1, Adam Ingram.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what employment initiatives it is supporting in the Carrick, Cumnock and Doon Valley constituency.
Thank you. Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government currently supports a range of employment initiatives across South and East Ayrshire, including Youth Employment Scotland Fund support, with bids from the local authorities of up to 865 places, up to 50 Community Jobs Scotland places this year, and 569 modern apprenticeship and 637 employability fund starts across the 2 local authority areas between April and September 2013. In addition, the Scottish Government provided funding of up to £129,000 to East Ayrshire and up to £116,000 to South Ayrshire to support the delivery of opportunities for all, our guarantee of education or training for any young person aged 16 to 19 not in work, education or training.
Adam Ingram.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer. Can I ask him to what extent these initiatives are addressing the economic vulnerability of towns in my constituency, notably Girvan, Cumnock and Maybole, which were identified in the Rural Scotland Report 2012, highlighting the disadvantage of rural areas in the southwest of Scotland, and what plans does the Scottish Government have to further address and remove that vulnerability?
Cabinet Secretary.
I quite understand the issues that Mr Ingram raises on behalf of his constituents, and indeed I participated some time ago with Mr Ingram in a discussion with local representatives in his constituency about some of these economic challenges. The particular examples that I cited in my answer are all measures that are designed to have a fundamentally local focus about their activities, designed to ensure that in smaller localities, such as the towns that will make up Mr Ingram's constituency, the towns and villages and smaller settlements, there is an ability for these practical and accessible local initiatives to be taken forward in a way that is consistent with tackling the economic challenges that exist. There will, of course, be wider approaches that the Government takes through its investment in housing stock and in the work that, for example, Mr Ewing is taking forward in tackling some of the issues that arise out of the issues and difficulties that have emerged in the open cast coal sector. So in all of these respects, the Government has a very focused agenda at a level of regional-wide initiatives, but also of locally focused initiatives to support the economy in the Carrick, Cumnock and Doon Valley constituency.
Thank you. Question number 2, Liam MacArthur.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what steps it will take to assist the staff of Ortac Jewellery Limited following the company's closure. Minister
Fergus Ewing.
I was saddened to learn of the situation at Ortac and it's of major concern. On the 8th of January, I spoke to James Stephen of BDO, who advised me that trading would continue whilst efforts are made regarding the sale of elements of the business. We are supporting those efforts through our agency, Highlands and Islands Enterprise. I also made the offer of support through our Partnership Action for Continuing Employment initiative for any staff who may be affected by redundancy, and stressed the need for the PACE team to have early access to provide this support.
Liam MacArthur.
Thank you very much. I very much appreciate the Minister's comments, and can I thank him personally for his involvement and support, and that of his officials in in Orkney in particular over recent days. Can I also welcome again the commitment from the First Minister last week to support the staff affected and support any viable bid to safeguard particularly the manufacturing jobs based in the islands I represent. I know he won't be able to comment specifically on the detail of the case, but would he agree with me that the importance of those manufacturing jobs in particular, not just to Ortac, but to the many small jewellery businesses in Orkney that rely on that facility for castings and other vital work, should not be underestimated, and underscore the importance of doing everything possible to support, as I say, any viable bid?
Minister.
Well, I recognise the hard work that Liam MacArthur has put in this on behalf of his constituents, as is right and proper, and the private discussions that we have had. So, of course, I will continue both to ensure that I am fully abreast of developments with HIE and the Administrator, but also to communicate with Mr MacArthur. To answer his question, yes, I do agree. I think it's very important that we make all reasonable and proportionate efforts to ensure that manufacturing capability is preserved in Orkney, which has a reputation for distinction in providing high-quality jewellery, not only in Ortac, but also, of course, Sheila Fleet.
Thank you. Question number 3, Alison McInnes.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government how a subject of a compulsory purchase order can complain about how the process is being conducted.
Minister Derek Mackay.
Complaints should be directed to the public body pursuing the compulsory purchase order. Where someone is not happy with the outcome, the matter may be referred to the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman.
Thank you. Alison McInnes.
Thank the Minister for that response. I have been approached by 2 constituents whose home is set to be demolished to make way for a building project. While they were disappointed about having to leave their home of 31 years, they didn't object to the compulsory purchase order, and the property was acquired by Scottish ministers in January 2013 on the understanding that they would not be required to vacate it until August 2014. However, this date has subsequently changed 3 times in 2 months, and it's now demanded that they leave their home by the end of January. My constituents are appalled that the original arrangement has not been honoured. Does the Minister agree that this situation is fundamentally unfair, and will he agree to look at this case personally? And can you tell me what opportunities my constituents have to complain in detail about the CPO progress once agreed is being conducted and the conduct of the officials involved?
Minister.
I'm happy to, if that's appropriate and not subject to any other complaints procedure, make ministerial inquiries into the case to ensure that everything that was agreed to be done has been done. But in more general terms, I am confident and satisfied that the processes in place are sufficient to both challenge and complain about compulsory purchase orders as it was reviewed, and we are trying to streamline and simplify the process whilst guaranteeing the safeguards that you would expect to be in case. But if it is in order, I'll certainly look into the individual case inquiry if Alison McInnes would be so kind to write to me about it.
Question number 4, Christina McKelvey.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what response it has received from the UK Government to its request that money collected from the open cast coal industry in Scotland should be made available to fund the legacy of Scotland's unrestored open cast mines.
Minister Fergus Ewing.
I wrote to the UK Government on September 17th last year and on 20th November requesting that the royalties collected by the UK Coal Authority for coal produced in Scotland be made available now to help fund or part fund the restoration of legacy open cast sites across Scotland. A holding response was received from Michael Fallon, UK Energy Minister, on the 8th of January this year to say that this request is being actively pursued with the UK Treasury at this time. We will, Presiding Officer, continue to pursue this line of inquiry with the UK Government.
Christina McKelvey.
Can I thank the Minister for that answer? And I think the Minister will understand that the Westminster Government has taken around £15 million from the open cast industry, and that there has been no return to the industry or the environment in respect of these payments. Does he agree with me that this money could make a significant contribution towards the restitution of open cast sites?
Minister.
Well, yes, I do. And I was actually very pleased that on the task force, which is cross-party representation, it was agreed across all parties, including Mr Fraser, who is in the Chamber today, and Labour members as well, that we should pursue this matter in a reasonable way. And I think there is an extremely strong case that this money, £15 million, as Christina McKelvey rightly says, should be used for the enormous challenges that we face in tackling the restoration of open cast mines in Scotland. This £15 million is the money that's been paid from the mines since privatisation of the coal industry in the early 90s, and unless it is simply a tax, then surely there is a strong moral and reasonable case that this money should be put to good use to meet, in part, the substantial costs of restoration throughout this country.
Thank you, Minister. Question number 5 has been withdrawn for understandable reasons. I therefore now call question number 6, Dennis Robertson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it's had with the UK Government at Westminster regarding the recommendations from Sir Ian Wood's interim report on the oil and gas industry.
Minister Fergus Ewing.
The Scottish Government welcomes Sir Ian Wood's interim report. We believe it should be implemented. A shadow body, as he suggests, should be set up. This is urgent given the prize involved, which he estimates as £200,000 million. We believe that Sir Ian's recommendations should be implemented with speed and that a shadow body should be headquartered in Aberdeen.
Dennis Robertson.
I thank the Minister for that response, and indeed he anticipated my supplementary in terms of the location of the shadow body. With regard to the shadow body, does the Minister have a date in mind for the implementation of the shadow body commencing its work in Aberdeen?
Minister.
Well, I believe that it should be possible to set up the shadow body very quickly indeed. In spring of this year, I think would be a reasonable target. I've communicated this view to the industry and also have communicated to the UK Government, both attending the pilot meeting on the 31st of October and the UK Council of Oil and Gas on the 7th of November, that the Scottish Government strongly support the implementation of Sir Ian Wood's proposals. And I think that if they are implemented with haste, with some expedition, then we can make enormous progress. And I think Sir Ian Wood himself, presiding officer, argued that a shadow body should be set up as soon as possible in order to take forward the extremely important work which could make such an enormous difference to both increasing revenue for the industry and an enormous potential windfall gain to the taxpayer of whichever Treasury is entitled to the money at the time.
Thank you. Question number 7, Kezia Dugdale.
To ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to help credit unions meet increased demand for their services.
Minister Fergus Ewing.
Credit unions are encouraged to access the Scottish Government's third sector organisational development and support programmes. We are working with the credit union representative bodies to ensure that their members across the country are aware of these programmes. Support includes the Enterprise Ready Fund, which opened in September 2013 and which will distribute £6 million during 2013 to 15 to help maintain, develop and grow Scotland's enterprising third sector. The Just Enterprise programme works alongside the Enterprise Ready Fund. It's a tailored service and provides business development support and training for third sector organisations across Scotland and is also available to credit unions.
Kezia Dugdale.
Can I thank the Minister for that answer? He'll be aware that the 12 Days of Debtmas campaign that he launched before Christmas was incredibly successful. Too successful, in fact, in the sense that some credit unions couldn't keep up with the demand for their services. Given that he's rejected my idea for a loan guarantee fund, an idea put forward with the support of ABCUL, what is he going to do now to support credit unions, or was his support just for Christmas?
Minister.
The campaign continues. The second phase of the campaign is being rolled out as we speak, and I hope that's welcomed. I met with a representative of ABCUL just yesterday. One of the things the credit unions want in Scotland, presiding officer, is the reforms in our bankruptcy bill, which would require those debtors who are able to pay to make a payment towards their debts for a period of 4 years. Sadly, the Labour Party, as far as I can understand their position, opposes that. That's one very concrete measure which virtually all the credit unions in our consultation supported, and I very much hope that perhaps after reconsideration they will have cross-party support throughout this chamber. To answer the issue about the Loan Guarantee Fund, there was not majority support for a Loan Guarantee Fund as proposed by Kezia Dugdale. We considered this extremely carefully. There was strong opposition from a considerable number of credit unions. And alternative proposals, fortunately, have been made by the Scottish League of Credit Unions. And we are considering these alternative proposals, and I'm happy to inform members that these would include the possible examination of merger of credit unions to enable a smaller number of perhaps more financially robust organisations to provide the excellent services which credit unions do throughout the country. So I hope that that will have cross-party support.
Question number 8, Murdo Fraser.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government when it last met representatives of CBI Scotland and what issues were discussed.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, on the 18th of December 2013, representatives of CBI Scotland attended the National Economic Forum to discuss the way forward to further sustainable economic growth. Later that day, the Minister for Enterprise, Energy and Tourism chaired a meeting of the Small Business Consultative Group, which included a CBI Scotland representative. The group discussed support for micro-businesses, business legacy from major events in 2014 and the Town Centre's Action Plan.
Thank you. Murdo Fraser.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his response. Can he reassure us that the Scottish Government values the contribution made by CBI Scotland to the ongoing policy debate? Would he agree that those from the business community who speak out either for or against independence should be free to do so without being attacked for their views? And would he like to take this opportunity to distance himself from some of the disgraceful language used by some in the Yes campaign to describe the very well-respected director of CBI Scotland, Ian McMillan?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think I've made no secret of this fact, and I think Mr Fraser's witnessed this personally by the nature of the debates that he and I have taken part in, not least of which I would suggest is a very good example of this, the debate we had one Friday evening with the Cooper Business Network, if my memory serves me right, that I think it's really important throughout this debate that everybody that participates in the debate does so openly, with transparency and with courtesy. And those are the values that I bring to this debate, and I think those are the values that everyone should bring to the debate.
Thank you. Question number 9, Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it supports job creation in North Glasgow.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, through the Government's programme of activity and particularly through its procurement, which is worth £9.8 billion in 2011-12, the Government supports the creation of demand and supports employment within the Scottish economy. That has a particular effect in the City of Glasgow with the support through procurement measures and other financial support that the Government makes available to Glasgow City Council, to the housing associations in Glasgow. That's becoming increasingly evident in the preparations for the Commonwealth Games and some of the projects taken forward under the umbrella of the Scottish Futures Trust. Several other initiatives are taken forward to provide the employment opportunities that are necessary in some of the localities in the north of Glasgow. For example, we've provided £100,000 of funding for NG Homes Kickstart Futures project, and also a further £50,000 for the Maryhill and Postle Park Citizens Advice Bureau Moneywise Jobwise scheme, which is a service providing support to people living in the Maryhill and Postle Park areas of Glasgow.
Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response, and the funding to both those projects is very welcome. However, there is another important project in my constituency in the area of Royston, which has been supporting those young people who are hardest to reach in the employment market. It's called Royston at Work. Indeed, the Cabinet Secretary's colleague, Ms Constance, was delighted to be able to give out awards at their last awards ceremony. Unfortunately, however, it would appear that that project may not be able to continue because of the inability of any of the agencies to come up with an appropriate amount of cash to be able to assist with that project. It's one that is very highly regarded in the area, has made a very significant difference to, as I say, very hard to reach young people trying to get into the job market. And I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary would have any suggestions to make as to other sources where that project might look.
Cabinet Secretary.
The first thing I'd say is that I'm not familiar with the specific project that Ms Ferguson raises, but I am familiar with a range of projects around the country of that type which do utterly invaluable work in supporting young people who, for a whole variety of different reasons, many of them completely beyond their control, have found themselves in a position of being very isolated from the labour market and found that journey into the labour market very difficult. And many of these organisations have good track records of, frankly, achieving what looks like the impossible with some young people in supporting them in that journey. If Ms Ferguson would care to write to me with the details of the project, I will happily explore the circumstances and see what we can do. I think it's important, where we find good practice, that we try to support good practice, and I will endeavour to do as much as I can to assist in this project if she would give me the details.
Supplementary, Bob Doris.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I want to echo the calls of Patricia Ferguson in relation to the Royston at Work project, a project I know very well. I have written to the Cabinet Secretary already in relation to it. Would the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that projects such as Royston at Work that is funded initially by the big lottery fund where good practice and outcomes are met, the Scottish Government or whoever should find ways of mainstreaming that funding so that best practice can endure and not just be a short-term initiative.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as we go through this question time session, President Officer, you hear more details which allow you to form ministers to form a view on what's perhaps happened here. And if there's been original lottery funding, the lottery, the big lottery committee in Scotland, I want to pay warm tribute to them. They take a whole range of innovative decisions about funding projects that allow good practice to emerge. The challenge for the public sector is when those temporary periods of funding elapse, is about finding a sustainable channel of funding to support that in future years. So, in the light of that information, I'll look very carefully at this particular initiative and see if there are ways in which we can take forward measures. I should, however, just put the caveat down that, of course, the Government has got a finite amount of resources at our disposal, and while we do endeavour to try to extend the reach of those initiatives, there will be financial constraints that operate in those times. But good practice, we should work very hard to maintain good practice.
Thank you. Question number 10, Lewis MacDonald.
Thank you very much. To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it has had with Aberdeen City Council regarding a new exhibition and conference centre.
Minister Derek Mackay.
The Chief Executive of Scottish Enterprise met with Aberdeen City Council leaders on the 18th of November to discuss a number of issues, including a new exhibition and conference centre. This was followed by a meeting of Scottish Enterprise officials and representatives of the Council on 12th of December to discuss a proposal on how SE might be involved.
Thank you, Lewis
Minister, for that answer. Given that Aberdeen hosts Offshore Europe, Scotland's largest conference and indeed the largest energy event anywhere in the world out with Houston, as well as many other major events, will the Minister acknowledge that Aberdeen's Exhibition and Conference Centre is indeed of national and international significance? And will he ensure that Scottish Enterprise approaches the redevelopment of the Aberdeen Centre on the same basis as it has approached the redevelopment of exhibition centres in Glasgow and Edinburgh in the recent past?
Minister.
Mr MacDonald very helpfully highlights the importance of Aberdeen in the energy sector, and I'm sure Mr Ewing would particularly welcome its contribution and, yes, its ideal location in terms of developing both that sector in Scotland and also the conference strategy that Mr Ewing has also led on. So absolutely Aberdeen should feature as a place of national and international significance. And of course, speaking for Scottish Enterprise, who of course have operational independence, we would all expect to put a clear focus on the business case once it is received. And of course Aberdeen would enjoy the kind of support expressed around the country, but this can only be judged on the basis of a business case, which we look very forward to receiving. And I did of course check the comparators in Glasgow and Edinburgh, and over the last 6 years the business case hadn't been received by Scottish Enterprise. But as soon as it is, it will be given due consideration and all worthy support.
Supplementary from Kevin Stewart, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I look forward to the SNP Spring Conference at the AACC later on this spring. When they first came to power, the Labour-led administration in Aberdeen claimed to have written off the debt of the current AACC, but I understand that this is still not the case. Does the Minister agree that it may not be wise to invest in a new facility when the significant debt of the existing facility remains on the books?
Minister.
I look forward to chairing that conference, but that's completely irrelevant to my ministerial role. So moving on, it's our information, the information we have, is that Aberdeen City Council has indicated the debt has been paid, and this is what Scottish Enterprise has been told. We don't hold any information to the contrary, so I'm happy to ensure that this matter is clarified so that any financial decision by Aberdeen City Council is taken within the prudential borrowing framework, and that's what any elected member, both in this Parliament or the Council, would surely expect.
Question number 11, Colin Keir.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what the economic impact would be of the proposals on childcare outlined in the White Paper on Independence.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, in Scotland's future, the Government set out our ambition to establish after independence a universal system of high-quality early learning and childcare for children from the age of 1 to when they start school. As part of our commitment to this, we announced an expansion of free childcare provision to cover 27% of 2-year-olds from August next year. Increasing participation in the labour market will have positive impacts on the Scottish economy and tax revenues. In the long term, increasing female labour market activity rates by 6 percentage points could increase the level of economic output by around £2.2 billion, while tax revenues could be around £700 million higher.
Colin Kay.
Thank you. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that such a transformational policy matches the drive and ambition of the people of Scotland, and would, following independence, ensure that Scotland acted as a beacon for progressiveness and fairness, helping those struggling with childcare costs?
Cabinet Secretary.
So, Mr Chairman, it's a fair point that the investment that would be associated with expanding childcare support in Scotland would have a significant benefit for our youngest citizens, but it would also have the benefit of creating and making it easier for more and more individuals, principally women, to participate in the economy. And by boosting our economic participation levels in the fashion that I set out in my original answer, would significantly strengthen the degree of economic activity in Scotland and the revenues available to the Government of an Independent Scotland.
Supplementary, Kezia Dugdale.
Thank you, President Officer. I read the Cabinet Secretary's analysis of his childcare policy at the weekend. I wonder if you could tell us, specifically on the tax receipts, what percentage of jobs are full-time? Cabinet Secretary.
I can't give the specific answer to the point that Kezia Dugdale makes in her question, but what I would say to her is that I think the analysis proves very clearly the benefits of the policy that we've set out because of the impact it would have on economic activity in general in the Scottish economy, and particularly on tax revenues. And of course the contrast with the arrangements that will exist under the Scotland Act, for example, which is just about to be implemented, is that where revenues for the 4 main taxes collected in Scotland to increase by 1%, and the core welfare budget to reduce by the same amount because of people going into the labour market, around 88% of the funds raised would go to the Treasury. And that strikes me as a wasted opportunity in terms of being able to invest in the Scottish economy and the future of delivery of public services for the people of our country.
Question number 12, Michael McMahon.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government when it last met Energy UK.
Minister Fergus Ewing.
Both ministers and officials are in regular contact with Energy UK on a range of issues, including electricity market reform, energy efficiency and fuel poverty.
Michael McMahon.
I thank the Minister for his response. Is the Minister aware that while it's encouraging that business confidence in the energy sector remains positive at present, there was a slight drop in overall confidence in the third quarter of last year? Figures within the oil and gas sector in particular have stated that factors such as a shortage of skilled personnel, wage inflation and growing operating costs may have dampened any rise in optimism across the industry. Does the Minister recognise this situation, and can he outline any specific actions the Scottish Government is taking to address the skills shortage in particular?
Minister.
Well, yes, I do, and yes, I can. And I've spent a lot of time working with people in industry on this matter, and I think Michael McMahon has asked a very sensible question on these areas. It's one of the enormous opportunities in Scotland comes from the huge investment that is planned in the oil and gas industry, not just £13 billion this year, but £100 billion in the pipeline. And last week I heard about the Mariner field from the Chief Executive of Statoil, whom I met in Oslo on Friday. It is clear the world has confidence in Scotland, they are investing in Scotland, and we must work with Oil and Gas UK, with OPITO, with the Offshore Contractors Association, with the UK Government, with the local authority and with all parties to deliver the skills. And I think we also need to look at other parts of Scotland, such as Ayrshire that Mr Gibson here represents, such as the north of Scotland, the Highlands and the north east. Many parts of Scotland can contribute to the continued success of the industry, and there is opportunities to transition from engineering across to oil and gas. And above all, we must dispel the lingering perception that oil and gas has run out in Scotland. The contrary is the case. There will, as we now know, be extraction of oil and gas till beyond the middle of this century. It offers an enormously rewarding and interesting career to young people. So we must inspire young people, fill them with confidence about this industry, and not decry it, belittle it, or say that it will not produce enormous wealth.
Supplementary from Rob Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm sure that the Minister will welcome yesterday's publication of the Scottish Renewables Employment in Renewable Energy in Scotland report, which suggests that across the country there is a steady growth of numbers employed to around over 11,500 at the moment in the renewable industry and the supply chain. But does he share my concerns that prevarication over energy policy by the UK Government is seriously inhibiting Scotland's renewable energy opportunities and the quality jobs that are created in my constituency and many others?
Minister.
Well, I very much welcome the analysis from Scottish Renewables that the number of people employed overall in the renewable sector in Scotland across all the range of renewables, obviously wind energy, but biomass, hydropower, of course, and work in relation to the grid, that this is at record levels. And I think that's a tribute to the support of the government and the success of industry and developers and communities, indeed, who receive enormous community benefit. But, of course, I think it is beyond political observation to say that the uncertainty over EMR has hardly filled investors with confidence, and there are concerns that the announcements made will not enable offshore wind, for example, to achieve its full potential, and that the FIT rules regarding hydropower and degression do not help either. So we are working very closely with Scottish Renewables to overcome these problems. And of course, in conclusion, Presiding Officer, Scottish renewable electricity is necessary to keep the lights on in England. The margin is now 2% of excess of supply of demand. And therefore, if there is any further failure of coal generation stations, for example, then there will be a deficit. This is a very serious situation, but fortunately, Scotland is at hand to provide the solution and keep the lights on in England.
Thank you. Minister, could I ask if you're answering a question to address the microphone, because it may be difficult for the official report and myself to hear you otherwise. Question number 13, Linda Fabiani.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what the economic benefits to Scotland are of the revenues from North Sea oil.
Thank you, Minister. Fergus.
In 2012, oil and gas production was estimated to have contributed around £22 billion to Scottish GDP. Around 225,000 people are employed directly or indirectly in the sector across Scotland. Oil and Gas UK estimate that there are up to 24,000 million barrels of recoverable oil and gas remaining in the North Sea, with a potential wholesale value of up to £1.5 trillion, that is £1.5 million. That means that more than half the value of North Sea oil could still be extracted, which, if realised, affords Scotland greater choices and chances to strengthen its already diverse economy.
Thank you. Linda Fabiani.
Thank you. The Minister will be aware of the many times that the UK Government and its allies quoted the OBR's 2012 oil price forecast as reliable and credible. Does the Minister therefore share my surprise that the OBR's recent change in forecasting methodology passed without any comment? And does he agree with Alistair Darling that the OBR seems to be not much more than an extension of the Conservative Party, with little credibility at all on this vital issue?
Minister.
I must confess not to make a careful study of the collected oeuvre of Mr Darling's comments on matters. But what I can say is that we have an enormous opportunity in Scotland, especially young people, to have careers in an industry which is leading in the world, and where, like Norway, we can husband that resource with the powers of independence. And Norway, just last week, the day after I visited, by sheer coincidence, it so happened that every citizen in Norway became a paper kroner millionaire. Such is the effect, in just over 2 decades, of accumulating through good husbandry the enormous wealth that they generate. And the great news is this industry is alive and kicking, and provided we meet the challenges, Scotland, with the powers of independence, can do that as well.
Brief supplementary, Gavin Brown.
Thank you. Will the Scottish Government publish their updated projections for revenues from North Sea oil?
Minister.
Well, we want the revenue to be maximised, and if Mr Brown was listening earlier, the key to doing, well, he laughs, but actually
Order, please.
he's laughing at his own government's
Order, Mr.
plan.
Fraser.
Because if we want to maximise the revenue, then we have to take very seriously Sir Ian Wood's analysis. I commend a good read of the interim report to Mr Brown, because, you see, its analysis is it depends entirely on the policies that you pursue. Are we going to pursue the policies of the past, which have undermined confidence in the UK? Mr Brown presumably enjoyed the tax hike in 2011, which undermined confidence in the UK in boardrooms throughout the world. Or are we going to pursue the policies of the Labour Party in the last decade, where they had similar unheralded tax hikes? The answer, Presiding Officer, is entirely that. It depends upon the policies one pursues.
Order.
And the UK have quite simply pursued the wrong policies, and that is why Norway have succeeded in recovering around 50% of oil and gas from their fields, whereas in the UK the recovery rates, sadly, have been much lower. The industry understands that. I hope in time Mr Brown and his colleagues and friends in the Labour Party will understand that.
Question number 14, Jean Urquhart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to enhance the role of community councils.
Minister Derek Mackay.
The Scottish Government, in collaboration with COSLA and the Improvement Service, is supporting a project to enhance the role of community councils. The project will include exploring training opportunities for community councillors, making better use of electronic communication, investigating the possibility of running pilot projects to enhance participation in community councils.
Jean Urquhart.
I thank the Minister for his answer. As you'll be aware, there have been a couple of instances in recent months where community councils have opposed local government decisions and felt that they've not been properly consulted or listened to, and in some cases have disbanded. What words of encouragement can the Minister offer these groups?
Minister.
Local community councils are perfectly entitled to disagree with the local authority or, for that matter, Scottish Government. They are independent to represent their communities, and I would encourage them to do so enthusiastically.
Question number 15, Bob Doris.
To ask the Scottish Government how its small business bonus scheme supports businesses in Glasgow.
Minister Derek Mackay.
In Glasgow, 8,440 businesses' properties are benefiting from the Small Business Bonus Scheme. As a result, Glasgow businesses have saved a total of over £79 million in business rates taxation since the scheme was introduced by this Government in 2008. The Scottish Government has committed to maintain small business bonus for the lifetime of the current Parliament and recently announced an expansion of the scheme to include an additional 4,000 business premises.
Bob Doris.
Minister, for that answer, can I draw the Minister to information on the Scottish Assessor's website that on Maryhill Road there's potentially 243 commercial units could qualify for the small business bonus. In Springburn Shopping Centre it's 34, and in Rutherglen Main Street it's 68. Small businesses have approached me asking for such reassurance that the small business bonus is safe with the Scottish Government, because it protects businesses and it protects jobs, and they are worried that the Labour Party is seeking to abolish that, and with it that support.
Minister.
Well, certainly the SNP Scottish Government has delivered our pledges on business rates, on the small business bonus, to create the most generous and welcome package of relief in these islands. The small business bonus is here to stay, even whilst the Labour Party abandoned policies in this area and a whole host of other areas. We know it has been of great value to the businesses of Scotland, and particularly in town centres, and that's why the small business bonus is here to stay.
Thank you. Very brief questions and answers on question 16, please. Drew Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on the recent Financial Times survey on how a vote for independence would affect the Scottish economy and the rest of the UK in 2014.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
The Financial Times survey asked a series of questions about independence, about issues focusing on the global and UK economies. Whilst the survey answers were interesting on the subject of independence, a number of commentators confirmed that they had little knowledge of the Scottish debate, while others have seen their comments overtaken by the UK Treasury's announcement that it accepts it is responsible for UK debts. Overall, the survey showed a significant level of concern with the way in which the UK Government had handled the recession and the proposed UK referendum on in-out membership of the European Union.
Briefly, please. Drew Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm grateful to the Cabinet Secretary for the answer. 100 economists, academics and business leaders who overwhelmingly rejected or expressed concerns about the uncertainty in the Scottish Government's plans, many using words such as disastrous, catastrophic and economically illiterate. So presumably that was a disappointing response for Mr Swinney. But can he tell us whether the Scottish Government's plans to default on our debts if the rest of the UK does not agree to a British currency union would be likely to make these economists more open-minded to Scottish independence?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, let me, Mr Smith cites the people who are commenting in this survey. Some of them are saying things like, I would include myself as having insufficient understanding of the position in Scotland. I am no expert on Scotland, was what one of the other people said. So if Mr Smith, I come back to my answer to Mr Fraser, who's now disappeared, where I said that I think it's important that we have a thoughtful debate where people contribute sensibly and with courtesy. And Mr Smith devalues his contribution to the debate by talking about default. The only people talking about default have been the United Kingdom government ministers who on Monday were forced into a complete humiliating U-turn in their position and accepting the responsibility which was always theirs for the United Kingdom's debt that has been run up by a combination of the incompetence of this side of the chamber and the incompetence of that side of the chamber. And we want to be responsible for balancing the books and ensuring that we operate strong and sustainable public finances in the best interests of the people of this country.
Thank you. That concludes portfolio questions, and it brings us to the next item of business, which is the debate on motion number 8752 in the name of Neil Findlay on the NHS in Scotland.